Hello, and welcome back to another video from Secrets of the Rings. Today we delve into our second scenario regarding the unholy alliance of Smaug and Sauron under the same banner. When faced against this wretched alliance, could the free people of Middle-earth successfully fight back somehow? In this particular investigation, we will propose a few changes to the specific scenario. In this particular case, Gandalf and Bilbo would still be late to attend to Smaug and Sauron's forces over Mirkwood, but they would manage to evade the siege of Mirkwood, going south with Beorn's horses, returning to Rivendell, and arriving before the enemy leaves the forest. The enemy would still not know Gandalf's whereabouts, and would still conduct the same assault on Mirkwood first. On this occasion, though, Gandalf would inform Elrond beforehand of the plan of the enemy and his alliance with the dragon Smaug. Together, they would form a bold plan to counter this otherworldly force. First, they would need to call upon all the allied forces they still had. Gandalf would send word to Rohan and Fangorn, calling upon Ents and men alike to prepare for combat. Elrond would send word to his elven kin to the west, especially the ones garrisoned at the Grey Havens and Lothlorien. Saruman would also be briefed, but no response given yet. The evil host would now begin to march towards the west and south, drawing forces from Gundabad and Dol Guldur. Lothlorien would be more prepared by now this time, and the war inside the forest would be a massacre in favor of the elves. Rivendell would suffer the hardest blow, with forces from both Gundabad and Mirkwood partially dispatched to assist on a double front, without counting on Smaug, who would soon arrive. Gandalf would have a plan though, and with the assistance of his friendships made along the ages and kingdoms, a trap would be laid for the dragon. A thick black cloud would descend upon Imladris, giving an eerie sense to what was once a cheerful and vibrant valley. As soon as the skies darken and the fiery breath seen falling down upon the mountain pass, the enemy would come through, marching at the sound of the dragon's roars. The time for the battle has begun. The casualties would be high, and the technology of the elves could only get them so far in a scenario against a force this strong, with a dragon such as Smaug coming from the skies. But their trap would be successful, and during one of the dragon's dives to spit its flames towards the valley, to burn the elvish forces hidden amidst the trees, a sudden light would descend, and the eagles would pierce the thick clouds from above, bringing cheers and hope once again to the free races of Middle-earth. Amidst the screeches of the birds and the screams from the serpent, Wormblood would fall as the battle became fiercer and fiercer, and the dragon's thick skin was pierced by the claws and beaks from the birds of prey. The dragon would be cunning and burn some of the birds, which have no protection on their feathers against such fire. But the sheer number of their force against the dragon would be enough, as the eagles are fast and agile, and would work together, overcoming the flames with their powerful wings that could harness the winds and blow the heat away, extinguishing the flames as they went. If the dragon would manage to survive the eagles, it would retreat, wounded without extra support from the skies, as he would have received coming from subsequent battles after enough time was given. During his fight between Mirkwood and the plains of the River Anduin, the injured dragon would stop to catch his breath and lick his wounds, angered at being outwitted. It would be at this time that another surprise attack would come, coming from the forest and the north, from Rosgobel, led by the brown wizard Radagast. The force would not be a problem for Smaug during his prime, but after being critically injured and having a Maiar in the form of Radagast leading the assault, the dragon would perish, ironically at the hand of an unlikely hero, in a similar portrayal to what Tolkien envisioned for his Lord of the Rings and Hobbit novels. The enemy host, albeit receiving a strong blow, would not yet be defeated. At nearly the same time as the Rivendell battle, the enemy would also begin to march upon Lothlorien, trying to anticipate any eventual assistance that would come from the south to the north. The legions of Dol Guldur would be successfully repelled, but a second surprise assault coming from Moria's gate from the flank would disrupt the defenses laid by Galadriel. By this time, though, the Ents would have reached their verdict, and would also come to a surprise attack amidst the fight. The cave goblins would be no match for the Ents fighting inside the forest itself, using the familiar territory along with enchantments and illusions cast by Galadriel. Sauron would suffer an important defeat at this front, and Saruman, although trying to send some assistance in the form of magic and small orc forces, would not yet be ready for a full assault, as he was in the late Third Age, during the War of the Ring with his Uruk-hai. After Saruman ousting himself, the men of Rohan, who would not be fully isolated from each other yet, and with Theoden still in charge of his senses, not ensnared by Saruman's lies and spells, would have been alerted. Shortly after, an attack with some of the Ents and Rohan forces would descend to Isengard, also laying siege to the area, until Gandalf's arrival and eventual banishment of the evil wizard, similar to what occurred in the events seen in The Lord of the Rings. In the third act, with the last strong enemy host residing inside the Black Gates of Mordor and Minas Morgul, with decades before the events of The Lord of the Rings, Sauron would not be strong enough to carry the same assault to Osgiliath and Gondor as the one we see him do during the War of the Ring, when he is better prepared. Because of this, the last alliance is formed once again, this time of men, elves, hobbits, and even beasts from the forests led by Radagast, to conquer the inhospitable lands of shadow and ash that is the plateau of Gorgoroth, where Orodruin, also known as Mount Doom, resides. Instead of Frodo, we'd have Bilbo himself, who would by now know the full extent of the history of the ring he possessed and the dire need to destroy it. Without spending decades with the ring under his possession, Bilbo's ability to withstand its power would be greater, maybe even more so than Frodo, as Sauron would not be strong enough to tempt or seek the ring, as much as he was able to in the Third Age, when he had more time and forces to prepare and amass power. On a direct strike at the Black Gate, the free folk of Middle-earth would clash with the waves of orcs that would flow through Cirith Gorgor, the Haunted Pass. Sauron's forces would know that a strike from Gondor or any other enemy coming from Osgiliath to Minas Morgul would be unlikely, so a call to arms from the western mountain range to the north would be the most logical thing to do. After almost emptying the stronghold and leaving the region unprotected, Gandalf, with the help of elves mounting some of the remaining eagles, would break from the clouds, successfully conquering the unguarded passage. The Nazgul, who once patrolled the region, would be required north to counter the forces of Galadriel and Elrond combined, which would be too strong to withstand with usual forces, especially if some of the eagles are present. Sauron would lash every beast, plague, and spell upon the northern enemy, but the surprise attack from the west with some of the eagles would catch him off guard. He would cast lightning strikes, meteors, and other spells upon the birds in a desperate attempt to evade his ultimate doom. After a hard landing near Orodruin, a small but powerful fellowship would run up the slopes of Mount Doom, and we would see the combined will of the fellowship, each one selected by the purity of their hearts and selfless acts of sacrifice, to be able to withstand and destroy the ring alongside Bilbo, assisting him in his unexpected quest. And thus, the last enemy of the free folk, Sauron, would perish, and his creations and idols would begin to collapse, starting with the foundations of his fortress, Barad-dûr. And so we would begin the Fourth Age of Middle-earth, and an early departure of the remaining elves from the land, toward the immortal lands of Aman.